Since retiring from the public's eye, I had resigned myself to a life of solitude. For 3 weeks, I started my day playing video games. Hours, then days, turned into one long, greasy game-a-thon. I even wore the same shirt the whole time. The next thing I know, I'm contacted by the government. They caught a whiff of something pretty nasty. Told me that I'd have to get back to work, that I'd have to play another game, a game buried in time. Gex. It was put up for sale on the PSN store, and they thought that I was crazy enough to download it. So we negotiate a little something to cover my expenses. They throw in one of those secret agent suits, and I tell them we've got a deal. Looks like I'm going back to the media dimension. It's gonna be deja ouch all over again. The Nintendo 64 was a really amazing console. Adding a third dimension to video games really gave them a lot more depth, both literally and figuratively. Super Mario 64 was the first 3D platformer, and without a doubt the most important video game developed to date. Nintendo had nothing to work with, this had never been done before. They would essentially have to become the pioneers of 3D video games. But the fact that they absolutely nailed it in every possible way was both as surprising as it was important. Seeing what Nintendo was capable of, many other game developers, both already existing and new to the game, were inspired to see what they could do. The Nintendo 64 eventually became the console to home a whole slew of 3D platformers of all shapes and sizes. Developers went absolutely nuts trying to create great worlds and lovable characters that they hoped would or could be as popular as Mario. They knew that this was their last and greatest chance to introduce new characters and franchises. Some did, for example Ubisoft's Rayman. Others didn't fare so well. Like, well, Gex.
Since retiring from the public's eye, I had resigned myself to a...
Honestly, I'm not really sure why Gex hasn't made it back. I'd personally attribute it to the fact that Gex's comedy style appeals more to a mature audience.
I give a little back.
But at the same time, Metal Gear Solid was a mature game, and it's made it all the way to here. So, today I'm going to be taking a look back at Gex 2, or Gex Enter the Gecko.
Coming through.
This is the only Gex game I've ever played, and until today, I've only ever played the N64 version. But for the purpose of this video, I'll have to be playing the PlayStation 1 version of Gex. Because 1, unfortunately I don't have most of the old N64 games I used to play, and 2, because it's available for download on the PSN store. While it upsets me a little bit that I'll never be able to play the actual same game that I played 16 years ago, it's actually a good thing, as while doing research for this I realized that the N64 lacked a lot of the content of the game due to hardware limitations. But we'll get into that later. Gex is a game about a gecko named Gex who has to save the world or something. There's very little story given, and I guess it assumes that you played the first Gex, but you don't need any to begin with. All you have to know is that Gex fights Rez, just like Mario fights Bowser and Link fights Ganondorf. The big selling point to Gex was its level concept. Each level in Gex is based on a particular genre of television or film. There's a cartoon level, a horror level, a sci-fi level, police drama, Christ, even Gilligan's Island. These ingeniously themed worlds give the game about half of its charm.
Nice hat. I feel like that moron from Shining Time Station.
The other half comes from Gex himself. Like I said, all these developers were trying to build that one solid character that would lead their company into the future. Almost more like mascots than video game characters. Thus, things like Gex were born. Gex, as you could guess, is some sort of major TV junkie. Throughout the game, he'll shout out a variety of quotes and one-liners from movies or about pop culture at the time. Back then, they added some good comedy to the game to fill out some of the otherwise barren areas.
I am most certainly not in the vicinity of Kansas anymore. I haven't seen blasts like this since Taco Night at James Earl Jones' house.
But today, they serve to age the game finely, at least in my opinion. Gex has some basic lines that he'll say all the time, some linked to events and actions, and even sets dedicated to the stage you're currently playing in. My favorites are definitely the ones from the cartoon stage.
Oh no, I'm too young to have a second childhood.
They call him Flipper, Flipper.
Hey, I feel like I'm trapped in Boy George's pants. Take your stinking paws off me, you damn dirty ape! Piranha!
This is really about your father, isn't it? To see the world as Keith Richards does.
My inner child is coming out, and it hurts!
We're on the road to nowhere.
The way these levels are accessed is pulled straight from Super Mario 64. Rather than paintings to jump into, Gex jumps into little TVs to enter stages.
It's tail time.
Come to think of it, even the main objectives take a heaping serving of inspiration from Mario 64. Each stage generally has about 3 red remotes to collect, Gex's version of stars. At the beginning of the stage, you can choose one of 3 hints that refers to what you'll have to do to get that red remote. There's one problem with this though. Unlike in Mario 64 where choosing that hint forces you to get that star, in Gex you can get any remote you please no matter what hint you chose. The levels are generally long with branching paths, so going down a route just to learn that you unlocked a remote that you didn't intend to can be kind of confusing. Confusing, but not necessarily bad. What is bad though is that Gex automatically leaves the stage after getting a remote. If all the other remotes are still available, why can't I just stay and get them all in a single run of the stage? As odds are, a player will try to get all of the remotes for a stage consecutively. Allowing the player to stay could have avoided the forced back and forth between the main hub and the stage.
That's what I call getting some tail.
The main hub is cool though, it's called the media dimension. It's here that you get access to all the different levels. And as you gain more red remotes, doors and bonus stages will be unlocked. Each stage also has 2 white remotes. Getting these white ones unlocks certain bonus stages. One white remote is always hidden somewhere in the level, and the other one is unlocked once the player collects a certain amount of things. This is the first point in which Mario and Gex differ. Gex doesn't collect items for health, he collects them for rewards. I really like the way they implemented collecting into each stage though. It's something I've never actually seen in any other game. Once you walk into a stage, all of the collectible items will have a certain appearance to them. For example, carrots in the cartoon levels. After collecting 30, the player receives a new life and the items suddenly change appearance. So here, soda cans. Once 40 of these items are gathered, the player again receives a life and the remaining items become a final form. So here, TNT. Finally, after collecting 50 of these, players rewarded with a white remote. Some of the bonus stages that can be unlocked are pretty funny, like the Indiana Jones one. Just listen to the music here. Most of them are just huge collectathons though under a time limit. Oh, okay, I gotta get that thing now. Could you stop counting down the timer while you tell me that? Jesus, oh my god! The spy one is really cool too. I love this cheesy spy music. It makes gags both about James Bond and Austin Powers. I mean, look at this, okay. So you're wearing the tux, you walk behind the thing and you get your shadow, you hit the switch, the disco lights turn on, and when you come out, you're wearing the disco suit. And this thing with the hallway and all the doors unlocking, it's just so perfect. The items in the game can be collected by simply finding the ones placed throughout the level, or by killing enemies to reveal more. Enemies all have clever designs that reflect the theme of their stage. But there are a couple of enemy types that seem to reappear in various levels, like the stationary bouncing ones, or the spinning heads that spit fire. Gex can only take 4 hits before dying, and unfortunately the flies that regenerate health are few and far apart. You find flies by smashing little TV sets throughout the level. The green flies regenerate health, purple ones give you a new life, orange ones set you on fire.
I'm flaming! In the manly way.
Oof. I think if they ever make a sequel to this game, they're gonna have to watch what they say to avoid any controversy. And blue ones that turn you to ice and give you invincibility. After smashing a TV, the fly will fly around you until you press the circle button to eat it and get its reward. If you choose not to eat it though, you can use your fly as a shield, as it can take the damage of a single hit for you.
Is it just me, or am I engulfed in flames?
Oh, something quick I just noticed. Gex strips the pause menu of the option to quit the game if you pause mid-jump. A lot of old platformers actually used to handle jumps this way. It was a way of preventing a player from quitting a level when they were about to fall off a ledge, only so they could save a life. It's funny though because the game doesn't have an autosave feature. It's like the developers are so afraid of me quitting the game mid-level so I can preserve 1 life, but they don't have any safeguard against me just not saving the game after I've lost a dozen lives on a tough stage. Another thing you'll notice from the pause menu is that the game features 3 camera options. The age of 3D video games brought with it many different interpretations of how to give the player a perspective of what was going on in the game. And Gex's solution was to allow the player to do it whichever way they want. You see, the direction you're moving in depends entirely on the direction of the camera. So if I'm moving forward and suddenly the camera changes direction, so will my movement. It's a real pain for some jumps though, as they give you just enough space to clear them safely. If the camera fidgets for even a second, the whole jump can be ruined. As per the norm in these old 3D platformers, Gex's camera also has its own physics. That means that the camera in the game wasn't just a perspective for the player to see from, but actually acted as a physical object in the game. The camera can't pass through walls or obstacles and can easily get stuck. It's absolutely terrible when platforming in sealed areas. It might be a somewhat hard concept for the newer generation of gamers to understand, but the thing was, every game handled this way. And it was because if they let the camera go out of bounds, you'd be able to see how the levels were laid out. And they didn't want to do that. They wanted to keep you in the game. They wanted to keep the illusion of this magical sort of environment. So it's not so bad, but it's something that doesn't age the game so well. Some of the hard parts in the game are made so because of the crappy camera, but most aren't. This game has sort of an even balance between between levels that are hard because the game mechanics don't necessarily work well with them, and levels that are hard because they're freaking amazingly designed. Gex's good levels are some of the funnest platforming stages I've ever played. Like, look at this. Simple puzzle enough, but it takes a while to get the rhythm of the movement and surpass it. Gex has some specific moves that make some sections of the game a little bit harder to get through than they have to be. Another key staple of Gex is his tongue. When Gex barely makes it to the edge of a platform, he will automatically shoot out his tongue to latch onto it and pull himself back up, while blurting out a stupid line like,
Licking my way to the top.
or,
A little tongue now, a lot of tail later.
Now this ability is very useful and saves you a lot. The problem is that it isn't very consistent. Sometimes it just doesn't work at all. Come on, licking my way to no, that's not to the top. Worse than that, sometimes it causes more harm than good. For example, the slip of the tongue just doesn't do its job on moving platforms. In some of these situations, it just would have been better if it let me fall. It appears to be that there's just a single frame between when Gex licks his way to the top and where he lands on a platform, where the game will keep him in the last known position of the platform. The problem is that since the tongue lands him right on the edge, one frame later, the edge of the platform will be somewhere else. This is why he sort of just stands there for a second before he falls off.
Slip of the tongue, baby.
It also takes way too long for Gex to go through the animation. So for example, in a platforming section like this, where I simply have to hop from rock to rock and eventually beat the speed of the lava waterfall, if Gex decides to get a little tongue now and a lot of tail later, it takes so much time that it sets me back a few levels and completely throws off my groove. For the record, I can't beat this part. I can get through the whole level, which is arguably one of the hardest levels in the game, and just because of the stupid tongue thing, I can't get over these rocks. The wall climbing mechanic is probably one of the only problem-free aspects of gameplay. The thing is, I wish it was used more freely, and not just for mandatory, almost on-rails sections. The maze on the ceiling of the Haunted Mansion is a great example of this mechanic being used properly. Holy crap, have I not talked about the horror levels yet? Okay, we're getting on that now. My absolute favorite levels in this game are the horror-themed ones.
Forget about it.
These stages are perfect. The music that plays, the enemies, the eerie screams in the background. Their overall designs are immensely confusing. Nothing makes sense. There's paths branching out every which way. I'm always afraid to choose a path to go down, worried that it might be the wrong one. These levels even make good use of hardware limitations. I mean, it's obvious that the drawing distance in this game isn't so good, but in the horror levels, by keeping everything far away from you blackened out, it feeds the creepy, eerie mood. These levels just make you feel completely lost and genuinely unsettle me. The difficulty curve in the game is particularly steep, which I personally appreciate, but leads us to point out probably one of the worst things about the game. The checkpoints in the levels of this game are very, very few. As far as I can tell, no level has more than one checkpoint. And like I said, some of them are pretty long. And to make matters even worse, generally in a level with 3 red remotes, the stage will eventually have 3 different paths to choose from. And more often than not, only one of these 3 paths will have a checkpoint in it. That means that if you die, you have to start all the way back at the beginning. What generally tends to happen is that you come face to face with a really hard platforming section. Now these sorts of sections are designed to have you fail a couple of times until you eventually solve it and succeed. The problem is that every time you fail, you get sent all the way back. And you first have to spend a couple of minutes completing all of the previous platforming sections before you can even have a second try at the one that's got you stumped. This is incredibly annoying. What makes this even more annoying is that I'm pretty sure that the game actually features a sort of hidden checkpoint mechanic installed for a different purpose. You see, Gex's stages feature dynamic music as well as loading and halting of processor hogging assets. What I mean is that when walking into a new section of the level, the music will sometimes change, which is really cool. The way the game does these musical changes is rather intuitive. You see, the way this could be done is that the game could track the player's position in XYZ coordinates, indicating the range in which a certain song should be playing. Running a program that constantly tracks the player's position is kind of inefficient though. When you think about it, all the game really needs is a cue as to when a player enters an area where a song should play and when they leave. Well, that's exactly how I think they did this. Instead of tracking the character's position, they put around the level what you could probably understand as motion detectors. When the player passes through one of these spots, the game gets the signal and can change the song. Once the player passes through another one that indicates they've left, the song can change and go back to the original. This way, the game is only waiting for a signal rather than monitoring something every second. Now, how could I possibly be so sure of this? Well, because I'm pretty sure it's the same way they handled the halting of useless processes. Here's a good example. See this little area? Well, there sure are a lot of dynamic pieces here. Platforms moving, popping in and out, blocks moving around. The thing is that the game was meant to run smoothly on the N64 and PS1. Once the player leaves this area, running these processes any longer would severely dampen the game, especially considering that the following area also has intense dynamics. So, as my motion sensor theory goes, once the game receives the signal that you've left that area, it can stop generating all the movement behind you and focus entirely on the movement in front of you. That means that, say you entered an area by some means that the developers didn't intend for you to, or by some path that they forgot to place motion sensors in, you can actually see that some of the assets will not be loaded. Like here, all the moving blocks before are completely gone, even though I'm in the area. The only way to make them work again is to leave and re-enter the area by a route that they expect you to, and that probably has some sort of virtual motion sensor in it. Really hope I'm right about all this. I'm pretty sure I am, but just in case I'm not, I'm sorry. Yeah. Christ, I'm sure the developers who made this game don't even remember how they did this. So now that I've more or less convinced you that the game already has in place a system to track the last place you passed through, then my question is, why isn't this used as a checkpoint feature rather than this crap? One checkpoint per level with branching paths is unheard of, and the fact that you have to manually hit them to activate them is just pointless. Anyways, this game is really long. After recording this footage, I spent 4 days playing it every night after work, just to finish it for this video. I got all of the red remotes except for the crazy red remote bonus stages. I don't really consider them a necessary part of the game, since the N64 version didn't even have them, but rather featured the Gex Cousteau level, the only level in the game that featured a swimming mechanic, which I'm really upset the PS1 version didn't have. I mean, to be honest, I played this whole game just waiting to unlock that level because I really had a few nice things to say about that. That was one of my favorite levels of the whole game, but the fact that I didn't even have the opportunity to look back at it is kind of disappointing. There are 3 boss battles in the game. The first one is actually a bonus stage. The first time I played this, I had literally no idea what was going on. Now, I'm assuming that this guy has something to do with the first Gex game, but I never played it, so I can't really trash talk this, but to someone like me, completely out of context, this is the most random thing ever. Oh yeah, I killed this thing! There's a Gexzilla versus Mecha-Res fight. It's kinda cool, but it's really tough. There's no way you can beat it on your first try. Because what annoys me the most about it is that it doesn't test any of the skills you've acquired in the game thus far. All I've been doing in the game up to this point is crazy platforming. So facing this whole new type of gameplay for a boss fight is kind of weird. And succeeding isn't really rewarding. It doesn't feel like I've achieved anything. It just feels like I completed something that was mandatory. The final boss isn't as bad, but still. Leading up to him is this way too long elevator thing. So yeah, you'll have to watch this all over again every time you fail. Great! For the first part of the fight, all you do is dodge his attacks, wait for him to try to charge at you. When he does, move out of the way so that he hits the wall and gets stunned, then tail whip him in the face. Okay, the enemy who charges at you and hits a wall and gets stunned when he's trying to hit you is classic video game boss design, like Rhino in Spider-Man 2, and even the freaky dude in Resident Evil 4 with his eyes sewn shut. No, but for a final boss, that's just bad. That's just unheard of. You don't do that. A final boss should be something huge, something that when you beat, you really feel like you did something. This is nothing. After doing that 3 times, he enters his final form. You jump over his arms when he sweeps at you. Hard. Wow. And when these buttons pop up, you have to stand on them so that he'll whack them, causing TVs to fall from the sky and bump his head. After each time you do it, the cycle speeds up a little, but you still only have to do it 3 times. The ending is weird. I just don't really know. Rez tells Gex that he's his father.
Yeah, right. How can you be my father?
Classic. The last movie reference in the game is a Star Wars one. Okay, I gotta give it to them for that. Then there's this scene. Apparently she's a character from another video game, but I don't really know. Whatever, this game isn't about story anyways.
Pardon my tongue, darling.
Come over here, you big stud.
Oh my god. Finally, the last negative thing I have to say about the game. As the credits roll, you treat it to some random animation on the left side. But as you'll notice, this animation is actually the same animation that starts up when you start the game that leads you to the main menu. Look, you can even see the camera passing by the main menu and then going through. I mean, the game is really good. It's a really good 3D platformer. But it feels like a lot of elements of the game that should have been really big deals are just kind of brushed over. Gex was a great game for its time. Amazingly designed, challenging platforming, all in a great world with one superb character. There was a Gex 3, I never played it. And apparently Square Enix might be looking into making a Gex 4 or something. Personally, I think I'd really like to see this happen. Just imagine what Gex would have to say about today's TV and pop culture. Well, I guess all we can do today is end this video as awkwardly as possible. Licking my way to the top. This one's for Mr. Sinatra. Slip of the tongue, baby. I'm just gonna stop saying Gex quotes because the more I say, the awkwarder this whole video gets. So the first thing that I'd like to say is that I apologize for the lighting changing halfway through my video. Because I started this morning and normally I use my lamp and I close the blinds because I'm always afraid the lighting will change. But today it seemed really nice. We had some nice overcast and I said I could use the natural light. So I opened my blinds way open and I turned off the lamp and I was like, it's perfect. And then I noticed halfway through that like a storm came and stuff. So before I forget, okay, you know what? This is really sad because just last video I talked about the whole thing I'm gonna do with the stack of, oh my god, you can't even see them because of the lighting, Christ. But yeah, I said I was gonna start stacking the games, and this game, unfortunately, I just downloaded onto my PlayStation because I don't have the physical game anymore. So I don't really have anything to stack except for this script. So I'm gonna put this script right here. Good enough. for me. So what I also have to say is that I did not do what I said I was gonna do. Haha. See, I said I was gonna do that port of the Wii game of the blah with the blah blah blah, but then I was surfing the PlayStation Network and I found Gex and a couple of other games and I said, you know what? That can wait. I need to play me some Gex. And I played me some Gex and it took me a while. Yes, I'm really sorry for the production time of this video. I really don't know when this video is gonna be finished and come out or anything. And I haven't yet filmed the intro, although I know exactly what I want to do for it. And but I am gonna try to get this done for the weekend. You know what? I'm gonna stop talking about when this video is gonna be released because by the time you're watching this, the video will be released. I don't know if I'm gonna be doing those after vids anymore on my second channel. I tried to upload one, it didn't work for some reason. I don't know what's going on. Whatever. You know what? Quickly while I'm here, because I noticed I haven't actually mentioned this for a while, but I am on Facebook and I am also on Twitter, and you can follow me on both of those if that's your thing. I don't really use either of them very often. On Facebook, I post my videos whenever I make them. On Twitter, I post nothing. I basically retweet a lot of Kojima tweets. So actually, you know what? Just follow me on Facebook and don't follow me on Twitter. Just follow Kojima, because all I'm gonna do is share that crap. So, yeah, we're done. I've only ever had 2 requests so far. I've had Battle for Bikini Bottom requested quite a bit, but I've also had people request Battalion Wars 2, which I said I was gonna do. You don't have to tell me. Don't worry. It's gonna come eventually, someday. Maybe I'll do it next. Oh wait, no, I know what I'm doing next. It's not Battalion Wars 2, it's something else. You're gonna like it. It's gonna be great. What else? Oh, this might be the last video in which this looks like this. Because I ordered a new wall scroll. Except it's a wall scroll that goes like this. I'm gonna turn off the camera now before I get a lightning storm. My camera blows up. So, goodbye. Have a good, Gex. Goodbye.